Hey, what's up? This is Harry Wagner from Harry's Situations, and today I want to talk to you about my 1977 Ford F150. Now, this is a truck that I've owned for about 10 years now, and you've seen it in other videos like 37's versus 40's or the high lift jack video. In that video, if you look in the comments, people say, cool truck, or hey, what year is that truck? Today, I want to go over the features of this truck, the origin story as it pertains to me, and then what I would do differently. So stay with us. The newest edition, 42-inch Nitto trail grapplers. So you know what they say, can't lose with 42's. And this video is actually brought to you by Nitto Tire. Even if you're not running 42's, even if you don't need trail grapplers, they make a tire for your application. Whatever size you need, whatever tread pattern you need, check them out at nittotire.com. I got this truck out of Gardnerville, Nevada back in 2013 for an event called Cheap Truck Challenge. So if you ever read Peterson's Four Wheel and Off-Road, or if you watch Dirt every day, Cheap Truck Challenge is the brainchild of Fred Williams, and the premise was whatever the year was, that's how much money you had to spend on a vehicle, and then you had an equal amount to modify it. It's crazy to think that I only paid $12.50 for this truck 10 years ago, because these have gone up in value quite a bit, just like everything else. I mean, it's even hard to have Cheap Truck Challenge these days, just with the prices of used vehicles. But I was able to score this truck for super cheap, and then the modification I made was just giant tires. So again, the premise here is to have a good time at Cheap Truck, not necessarily to take it too seriously. The year we did this, we were down in Arizona. Fred Williams spent his whole budget on a winch. I spent my whole budget on big tires. He's had other ones where they'll just buy a stereo system, because the premise is, what would a kid do with their money if they had an old vehicle? But as I'm prone to do, I fell in love with this truck after a while, and so I kept it, and I've been upgrading it over the years, just like you would do at home. And some people sweat me. They say, oh, must be nice to have a magazine budget, to have people send you a bunch of free parts. But quite honestly, this truck has junkyard axles, it has a 460 in it. I've never owned anything that had an LS engine or crate axles in it, so I'm doing it pretty similarly to what you would do at home. The other end of the spectrum is people that buy a brand new vehicle and then they get crate axles, crazy suspension, and double the investment price into it. I'm not really doing that either. I don't sweat them. If anything, I'm jealous, to be quite honest. I don't have the budget to do that. I would rather have something unique, look for used parts, spend some sweat equity, and end up with something cool like this truck. So after Cheap Truck Challenge, I went to Nate's Precision, and the first thing we did was swap out the engine. So it had a 351 in it. It had a bent push rod. When I got it, didn't run great. So we yanked that out. LA Speed built this 460 engine, so it's a full roller. It's got hyper-eutectic pistons, about 10-to-1 compression, good Edelbrock cylinder heads, an Edelbrock intake manifold. It had a Holley Truck Avenger on it for years. It actually has Phytec fuel injection now on it. Has been a really reliable engine without being crazy expensive. We use conversion parts from L&L to like their motor mounts and their headers to put it in the truck. And then it's got March pulleys on the front. The one issue I've had with this engine is that it uses a bronze distributor gear with that roller cam, and it chews up gears pretty regularly. When I say regularly, like every oil change, I have to change the cam gear. So obviously that's a problem, but I don't quite know what the cause is. If you know, comment below and let me know how I can fix it so I don't have to change it with every oil change. This engine makes decent power. I would estimate it around 500 horsepower, but in a 7,000-pound truck with 42-inch tall tires on it, it's not a speed demon by any stretch of the imagination. Behind the engine, I now have a ZF5 5-speed that was built by Axleline. Axleline's actually done the drive lines in the truck. They built the axles. They built the off-road design doubler that uses a 203 and 205. They've done a ton of work. If you're in Reno, highly recommend them. You may have seen Aaron from Axleline in a past video we did on what size tires you can run on a Dana 44. They're my go-to for driveline parts. The truck originally had an MP435 transmission in it, which is strong and it has a low first gear, that's all the good things I have to say about an MP435. They don't shift that great. They've got big gaps between the gears, no overdrive, and the ZF5 has made this way more drivable. It also uses a hydraulic clutch mechanism instead of a mechanical clutch linkage, which is useful on the trail because when you get flexed up, those mechanical linkages tend to bind up. As I mentioned, behind that, I've got an off-road design doubler, 203, 205, both of which have 2-to-1 low range. So not crazy deep gearing in this truck, but with all the torque of the big block, it goes down the trail great and crawls incredibly. The axles are junkyard Super Duty axles. The front's a Dana 60 and the rear's a Sterling axle. Not a lot of upgrades in the rear. It's got a Detroit locker and 513 Sierra gears. The front has a matching locker and gears, but it has a few more upgrades in it. It's got Dynatrac knuckles and Dynatrac hubs. It also has their ball joints. I went through a few different sets of ball joints and this truck ate them up like candy until I got the Dynatrac ball joints. The concern there is the bores, every time you put a ball joint in, stretch a little bit and they'll get loose. And that's actually in the castings on the axle housing. So if they get too loose, you have to find a new housing. So I would say buy once and cry once and just go straight to the Dynatracs if I were to do this again. Actually, a later axle, like an 05 Plus Super Duty axle, which weren't super common when I did this build, but now they're more common. They've got tighter steering, bigger brakes, bigger stub shafts. There's a lot of advantages to them, so you can avoid a lot of the upgrades that I needed to do to this axle just by going straight to an 05 Up Super Duty front axle. And it'll still have that 8-on-170 bolt pattern that matches the Sterling in the back. The suspension on this truck is similar to the stock configuration, so it still has radius arms in the front, but they're longer. Actually, I had Hound off-road down in Auburn build the front radius arms. They're canted in so that I can get plenty of steering without rubbing. I like running radius arms in the front. It's got leaf springs in the back, so a lot of sway control from those. Like, radius arms are known for binding more than something like a 3-link suspension. I like that when I'm going down the road. This doesn't have as much flex as if I had a triangulated 4-link in the back and a 3-link in the front. But I drive this truck on the street a lot. I've driven it to Anchorage. I've driven it to Cabo San Lucas and back. And really with Detroit's front and rear and 42-inch Nitto trail grapplers, you don't need a ton of flex to keep moving down the trail. The rear suspension uses a Deaver leaf spring, and I have an off-road design shackle flip to get the height to match the 6-inch coils from BDS in the front. I was running these with a monotube shock for years, and it just didn't have enough damping, particularly in the front end. The truck is fairly heavy with that 460. So one of the upgrades I did was Hound added 3-inch internal bypass shocks front and rear. I got those used, so I got a pretty good deal on them. If you went to buy a 3-inch internal bypass shock, they are not cheap. But fortunately, I was able to buy them for a fraction of the price of new. And then my friend Sam Cawthron at Samco Fabrication valved the shocks for me. I mean, I think the results speak for themselves. This thing smashes through the whoops with ease. I didn't want to paint this truck. I like the patina. I thought it has an old ranch truck feel to it. That was the theme I went with. Nate's Precision helped me in that regard. They built the 2 bumpers, front and rear, and didn't paint anything. The sliders, the front and rear bumpers, just kind of let them surface rust. I live in Reno in the desert, so rust isn't a huge deal. This truck has a little hole in the door, but overall, it's pretty clean. The front bumper is loaded with a Warren 16.5 TI winch with Masterpool winch line on it. You know, there's no LED light bars on this truck. I didn't really think that fit the theme. It's just got H4 headlights in it, and that's enough to roll down the road. In Mexico, I did almost hit a cow, but at least if you're in this truck, you're probably gonna win. The cow's gonna lose. I spent almost as much on the interior of this truck as I did on the purchase price, if you can believe that. LMC Parts has replacement door panels and all the little knobs that you need for the heater controls and things like that. So I got all of that new. It's got a rubber floor mat you can spray out. And then the seat I stole this idea from John Kappa. It's got a split bench with a bucket on the driver's side and a short bench like you would have out of the back of, say, a Jeep on the passenger side. Use the stock mechanism so you can still move the seat forward and back, but a lot more control now. The seat's from PRP, and I've got actually 5-point harnesses as well. Most of the time I just use the lap belt, but if it's gonna get spicy, I do put the shoulder straps and the sub strap on as well. When we redid the interior, Nate's Precision built this TIG welded roll cage. It goes through the dash. It actually ties into the rock sliders and is arguably the nicest feature in the truck. I couldn't be happier with the cage. They knocked it out of the park on that one. The bed of the truck, this is a short bed truck, and a 40-inch spare tire takes up most of the bed. I didn't run a 42 because it won't actually fit between the wheel wells with the shock hoops that were added for the bypass shocks. Prior to that, the shocks were actually canted over at an angle under the bed, pretty typical for like a Toyota rock crawler also, lots of rock crawlers. But with a bypass shock, in order for those tubes to function, the piston actually has to go past that tube. So the shocks, for the most part, you want straight up and down, so it'll cycle through all of the different range. A short bed truck doesn't have a ton of room, especially when you have a 40-inch spare in the back, but I've got a Lund toolbox in there with all my spare parts, my tools. The batteries are actually in there as well. On top of the spare, I put 4 max tracks. I put a Bubba rope inside the spare, and then I have a demo shovel in there as well. I love the snow wheel on this truck, and the max tracks and the Bubba rope and the demo shovel all come in handy anytime I'm on the trail snow wheeling. I wanted to talk a little bit more about these 42-inch Nitto trail grapplers. They're mounted on 20-inch TrailReady beadlock wheels. Now, I never thought I would be one to run dubs, but this is actually the smallest diameter wheel that Nitto offers the 42-inch trail grappler in. The reason being is that if you have a 17-inch wheel with a 42-inch tall tire, you have a lot of sidewall, and you can get so much sidewall that when you're on the trail, you turn the wheel actually turns within the tire when it's aired down, and you lose some of your steering. Nitto didn't want that to happen. You have effectively the same amount of sidewall as you would have running a 39-inch tall tire on a 17-inch wheel, which is plenty. But now I've gone up to a 20. TrailReady offers these in a few different finishes. I just got their polished wheels with the wide ring on them. Honestly, polished wheels I don't think fit the look on this truck. So I went and saw my friend Simon at Mark Powder Coating, and he had done my last set of TrailReadys in the rub bronze finish that's actually on the beadlock ring here. Simon talked me into a two-tone, sort of with a gold center and then that rub bronze ring, and I couldn't be happier with how they look. I'll be honest, I sweat people sometimes for their aesthetic decisions about things like angry eyes or paint matching everything or underglow lighting. But at the end of the day, I'm not immune from liking what I think looks good too. I mean, the cheapest thing to do would be not to powder coat these wheels, but they didn't fit the aesthetic I was looking for, which just happens to be a different aesthetic than what some other people that say go to Jeep Beach are after. The factory steering box was ported for hydraulic assist and actually wore out after a while. You can't get these boxes anymore, so I sent it into PSC. They removed the bearing that's in there and replaced it with actually a bushing between the housing and the sector shaft, and I haven't had any issues with that. It's held up well. The rest of the system is also from PSC. I've got their pump on here and then their hydraulic assist ram. I used to waste tie rods about once a year, even running like 1 3/4 250 wall tie rods, just because the biggest problem with this truck on the trail is it is hard to see out of. So I was running into things, and then the tie rod bends. I've since remedied that issue by running this Durham Motorsports aluminum tie rod that actually will deflect and return to its original shape. It is super strong. Now, not strong enough that I would use it as a recovery point, but certainly strong enough to turn 42-inch tall Nitto trail grapplers. I don't know if this is the most capable vehicle I own, but it definitely is the most fun. I've road tripped this thing all the way down to Cabo San Lucas and back, chasing the Nora Mexican 1000, and I even drove it to Alaska a couple years ago for Ultimate Adventure. This truck is as good on the street as it is on the trail. Where would you take it? Comment below and let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thanks for watching Driving Line. If you guys like this video, consider subscribing to our channel so you'll never miss any of the content we create here. Whether you're into trucks, Jeeps, imports, domestic vehicles, or anything in between, we are here to fuel your passion. So hit that subscribe button and we'll see you guys next time.